girl, baby girl. That is absolutely unacceptable.
The Sephardi identity isn't a claim for your celebrity. The coerced ones, the forced ones, AOC is not a word. Ethiopian, Ashkenazi, Sephardi, Mizrahi, and Baghdadi, all Jewish identity that isn't up for grabs because you want camaraderie.
Welcome back, everybody, and today we are going to discuss the hijacking of Jewish identity, heritage, and ancestry. And we're going to start with AOC. On December 9th, 2018, an X account by the handle Tally Crumpkin shared a video that she recorded while at a Hanukkah event with AOC. We are going to take a quick look at that video and break down all of her claims, and then we're going to talk about it.
People don't know about Puerto Rico, and one of the things that we discovered about ourselves is that a very, very long time ago, generations and generations ago, my family consisted of Sephardic Jews. And it is I knew it! I sensed it!
Claim number one, she is specifically claiming Jewish ancestry because she's not talking about Puerto Rico and the collective we. She specifically says her family discovered generations and generations ago that they came from Sephardic Jews. So she's claiming Jewish ancestry.
And the story goes is during the Spanish Inquisition, so many people were forced to convert on the exterior to Catholicism, but on the interior continued to practice their faith.
And right here is going to be point number two. She's talking about crypto Jews specifically, which we will get into. Now let's keep going.
Decided to flee up into the mountains, and as is the story of Puerto Rico, we are a people that are an amalgamation. We are no one thing. We are Black, we are Indigenous, we are Spanish, we are European, we are all of these things.
Okay, so claim number three, Puerto Rico is an amalgamation of all these things, but what are the things? She says we are Black, we are Indigenous, we are Spanish, and we are European, but if you notice, she never says we are Jews. Why would she leave that out? If she is certain that Jewish heritage is part of the collective Puerto Rican culture, which she will allude to in just a moment.
How the culture in Puerto Rico was that people would open their closets and there would be a small menorah inside. And then as they had children and their children had children, and their children's children had children, these cultures started to kind of mix and blend in a way.
Claim number four, Puerto Ricans open up their closets and find menorahs inside. Right. Well, let's break all of this down, shall we? The person who recorded the video, Tally Crumpkin, isn't just any ordinary person. She happened to be at the time a New York correspondent for Haaretz. It didn't take too long for the legacy media to start reporting on the event. One thing that I was curious about is why was AOC even at a Hanukkah event? Well, according to places like the Times of Israel and NBC, it wasn't too hard to figure out that it was entirely politically motivated. The event was organized by Jews for Racial and Economic Justice in Queens. And based on the picture here, Pickles to the Polls, by Jews for Racial and Economic Justice, we could see that votes were definitely top of mind. Naturally, AOC's Jewish claims were challenged, and there were also people who came to her defense. The very next day, on December 10th, AOC takes to X, formerly known as Twitter, to defend her position. Now, let's read her ridiculous tweet.
Before everyone jumps on me, yes, culture isn't DNA.
Well, that's interesting because if you remember, claim number one is that she was actually sharing Jewish ancestry. But what is she actually responding to here? Because I see something by Haaretz at the bottom, so let's look at that. Well, it turns out she is addressing the very quote where she claims many generations ago, my family consisted of Sephardic Jews. So instead of addressing the fact that she claimed Jewish ancestry, she decided to talk about culture. Not only does she deflect a culture, but she goes on again about what it means to be Puerto Rican and talks about who they are descendants of, but that's part of claim 2 that we'll get back to in just a moment. However, discussing who Puerto Ricans are descendant of allows her to talk about a collective we and avoid individual accountability for her claims that her family has Jewish ancestry.
My family consisted of Sephardic Jews.
So while she specifically says that her family consisted of Sephardic Jews, she goes on to tweet 2 more times in the same day to defend her position, but she only does it talking about the collective we. In the first part of her second tweet that same day, she goes on to say the following: just because one concrete identity may not be how we, the collective we, think of ourselves, the collective we, again, so she's not addressing her individual claim, which is what she's allegedly responding to after all. Now let's move on to claim number 2.
The Inquisition.
Look out, Sam.
We have a mission to convert the Jews.
During the Spanish Inquisition, so many people were forced to convert on the exterior to Catholicism, but on the
After AOC claims that she discovered that in her genealogy that her family actually came from Sephardic Jews, she goes on to state that the story goes that during the Spanish Inquisition, there were Jews that were forced to convert to Catholicism, but that was only exterior, right? On the inside, they still maintained their Jewish faith. What AOC has just done is give a very simple and yet accurate explanation of what a crypto Jew actually is. That doesn't mean that she actually came from Jews or that Puerto Rico somehow has a Jewish heritage and cultural identity just because they do have ancestors that came from Spain, where the Spanish Inquisition took place. I mean, AOC really didn't have an option but to lie here. Could you imagine if she would have said,
And we were Inquisitioners who tortured Jews. And yeah, we were Spanish Inquisitioners. It's funny because now we're friends. If you think that's funny, check this out. In the future, I'm going to blame you for a genocide.
However, after everything I've just shown you, that doesn't mean that there aren't people who still try to come to AOC's defense. About a month later in Jewish Currents, there was an article written called What Ocasio-Cortez's Jewish Heritage Means. An author by the name of Shaul Magid says claiming Jewish heritage is fundamentally different than claiming Jewishness, but it still matters. He starts by trying to identify what makes a person a Jew, and first he does well and says that it's based on who your mother is. It's through maternal lineage, but then he also recognizes the American Reform perspective, which states that it's paternal. So right here we can already see that he doesn't even care what the Torah has to say about it. He's just going to look at everybody's perspective. He also states that some people can't prove they're Jewish, and taking that, which is true, and applying it to somebody who lied doesn't make that lie a truth or with good intention. Additionally, a category of people who cannot find documentation to prove their Jewishness doesn't actually work for AOC, since she claims that her family discovered that they came from Sephardic Jews. Discovering Jewish ancestry implies that there is absolutely evidence to back up her family's claims or AOC's claims. If there is no such evidence, it's likely AOC made up the entire ordeal. The author then goes on to state that claiming Jewish heritage rather than Jewishness per se only suggests that one has Jewish ancestry, and from a Jewish perspective, that kind of claim doesn't need to be proven, right? Because they're not asking to be considered a Jew. However, heritage doesn't work in the event that he really wants it to work, because heritage is a special or individual possession, an allotted portion. God's love remains your heritage. Claiming Jewish heritage is synonymous with Jewishness because heritage gives entitlements to an individual, and these rights go far beyond an ethnicity claim. Culture, also, is absolutely a part of Jewishness, and to try and separate a culture from a people is a fraudulent, convoluted logic move. Period. So while heritage is synonymous with Jewishness, ethnicity is not necessarily synonymous with heritage, and that's what the author is missing. Finally, the author states, unless we take a cynical view that her announcement is a political ploy by a leader in the progressive left who has also been quite vocal in her critique of Israel, a view held by some who do not share her views, which I find somewhat offensive. However, Shaul Magid misses the part where the organization that invited her to the Hanukkah event is entirely political. Here is another photo from the website of the organization that hosted AOC, so it's not a critical view to say that it was political, it's an obvious view. Not only is it a lie to say that it was a critical view, and it's correct to say that it was an accurate view that it was political in nature, it seems that the author himself has a political agenda. Not too long ago, the exact same author, Shaul Magid, writes in September of 2024 an article titled, "Is Western Self-Hatred the Problem in the Gaza War Protest Movement?" In the article, he says that he went to a comprehensive webinar on campus protest and anti-Semitism, led by a prominent Hillel rabbi at an elite university, in which he states, and I quote, "I was shocked that there was no mention of Israel's war on Gaza." I'm sorry, but was it Israel who attacked Gaza on October 7th? Or was it the government of Gaza elected by the people of Gaza that actually attacked Israel on October 7th? Because that would make it Gaza's war on Israel. Then the author defending AOC goes on to state that Israelis are intentionally killing Gazan civilians. Who does that sound like? The idea that it's Israel's war on Gaza and Gaza hasn't done anything wrong and is just getting slaughtered by Israelis sounds a whole like Hamas.
Answer me this first of all. How does murdering hundreds of women and children and massacring young people at a music festival and kidnapping innocent civilians further the cause of the Palestinians?
Thank you very much. I am really shocked that you, as a well-respected journalist and well-respected channel, to adopt the Israeli propaganda.
So this Hamas correspondent claims that the attack on Israel by Hamas is Israeli propaganda. And who seems to be repeating that kind of claim? Oh yeah, Shaul, the author defending AOC. And for those of you who thinks that I might be reading between the lines, how about this blunt statement from the Hamas correspondent that said there were no Israeli civilians killed on October 7th. These people are living a Nazi lie.
Sorry to interrupt. Are you saying that civilians have not died?
We didn't kill any civilians. We didn't kill any civilians. We didn't kill any civilians.
Right, and if you believe Hamas when they say they didn't kill any civilians on October 7th, it would be no wonder that people would write things like Israel's war on Gaza. Then Shaul, AOC's defender, tries to state further in his article that sometimes anti-Semitism is acceptable because there's somehow a misconception that anti-Semitism is eternal, and that if it's, based on circumstances, then it's okay. This footage that you see right here took place in California, and the author is basically stating that this is totally permissible because they're Jews, they deserve it, considering the circumstances, right? Now let's move on to point number 3.
The story of Puerto Rico, we are a people that are an amalgamation. We are no one thing. We are black, we are indigenous, we are Spanish, we are European, we are all of these things.
AOC says we are black, we are indigenous, we are Spanish, we are European. However, she never says we are Jews. But she changes her tune quite a bit once she's on Twitter because she specifically says Jewish refugees. She doesn't mention crypto Jews, she doesn't mention Sephardic Jews, just a broad brush stroke of Jewish refugees. Which is interesting because she gets very specific about Africans now. As she says African Moors plus slaves, she gets more specific about who she considers to be indigenous when she says the Taino Indians, and she now even calls the Spanish colonizers. However, she replaces European with Jewish refugees and doesn't get specific about that. So if we were to take her statement that she made on video and take her written statement, we would have to assume that when she's talking about Jewish refugees, she was referring to the Europeans that she mentioned in her speech. Which is rather interesting because there's a very anti-Semitic view that states the Jews are fake Jews. They're not indigenous of the Levant, and instead they're indigenous to Europe. But let's go ahead and address her Jewish refugees claim and the claim that Puerto Ricans just happen to find menorahs in their closets with the next talking point. The Jerusalem Post actually challenges AOC and breaks down why her claims are not historically accurate. Right out of the gate, the author states that her ludicrous claim cannot stand a rigorous historical or rabbinical examination. And they completely demolish her by stating the only Latin American countries where crypto-Jews, also known as Marranos, Conversos, or secret Jews, were found and tried were Mexico, Peru, in the 16th and 17th centuries. And I would just like to note that while the author did use the word Marranos to be historically accurate, don't do it today. It's a derogatory term. Now let's demolish her final claim.
Flawless victory.
Let's jump right in. It says, during that period, no cases of crypto-Judaism were found in Puerto Rico, which was under the jurisdiction of the Cartagena, Colombia Tribunal of the Inquisition.
AOC don't know history. She just spewing tomfoolery. She makes big claims that ends up in a stains to all who actually believed her games. AOC is an imposter. I'm just Jews, just talking to you.
Thanks for watching, guys.